Hello my lovely people and welcome back to my channel. Today is a very exciting episode for me because I'm giving you my final update on the 6-month DBT program that I just finished this week. So I'm very excited and proud of myself for having completed that. It was a lot of work, but I'm looking forward to describing to you what my experience with the last module was like. Also disregard this weird little angelic glow that I've got going on. It's super sunny outside and I clearly don't have good lighting for filming, but we're just gonna roll with it. Similarly to my last update video on the DBT program, today I will be going over the specific skills that I learned along the way, as well as the main takeaways that I took from this specific module. Okay, so the third module that I completed is the one on distress tolerance, and boy, let me tell you that the skills were so useful. They were difficult to practice, but honestly, chef's kiss, they went a long way for how small and minor that they seem to be. Similarly to the two previous modules, we began with the first 2 or 3 sessions dedicated to going over the core mindfulness skills, such as observing, describing, participating, practicing, non-judgment. So that was a good refresher. I know that in the last one I spoke about how I was kind of out of it for the first couple of sessions because I had already learned those skills. And I think that I just gave myself an attitude check and went into it with a new, curious and beginner's mind, because obviously with relearning things, you are always picking up small things. So I think that I went into this third module much more open-minded, much more curious about the things that I was learning, and that enhanced the experience so much more. Once we learned the basic mindfulness skills, we then went into the distress tolerance skills, and the last things that we learned was reality acceptance skills. Okay, so the distress tolerance skills are really our crisis survival skills. They are the skills that we are meant to use when we're in this 911 panic mode, and these skills are there to help us to tolerate the moment without making it worse. But their aim is not necessarily at making things better. It's just helping us accept what is without adding fuel to the fire. During this portion of the module, there was 5 main skills that we learned. So we had the stop skill, the tip skill, distract, self-soothe, and improve the moment. The stop skill, which stands for stop, take a step back, observe, and proceed mindfully, is there to help us add distance in between these external or internal conflicts that we may be experiencing, so that we can remove ourselves, whether mentally, emotionally, or physically, from the situation, so that when we decide to re-engage with them, we're coming at them from a more neutral perspective to not worsen the situation. This skill can be difficult to practice because when you're in a heated argument with someone, the last thing you want to do is to step away from the conversation. This takes a lot of will and practice to get it integrated enough so that it comes more naturally. The more you try, the more you practice, the more the skill or the habit will build up within yourself to automatically go to this skill. So don't get discouraged when you're trying at first to apply it and it doesn't quite go as planned. You also don't need to physically take yourself away from situations. Maybe at the beginning it's more about mentally taking a step back and then re-engaging, and taking a step back and re-engaging. Those small micro patterns will eventually build up to a habitual skill that comes a lot more naturally for yourself. Another skill that they put a lot of emphasis on is the tip skill, which stands for temperature, intense exercise, paced breathing, or paired muscle relaxation. And honestly, I love this skill. This one is very useful. It gives you quick, instant changes to your body chemistry so that you can bring your emotional state down very quickly. So using temperature, they recommend splashing your face with cold water. You can go take a cold shower, put ice on your body, on your neck, on your face. And honestly, when you're submerged in really cold water, it's almost impossible to think of anything else. And giving you that quick shock to your system can help just to regulate you just enough so that once again, we're not making the situation worse. Exercise obviously has a lot of positive benefits for our mental health, and this can be a great way to regulate your emotions. Now, incorporating intense exercise into your routine is a good way to combat or keep at bay those more intense feelings that you might get normally. So for me, I really found that going back to the gym, my mood has been better, I sleep better at night, I'm more relaxed. So trying to incorporate this intense exercise daily can be great. You can also do it in the middle of an argument. So when you're arguing with someone or when there's a tense situation, you can remove yourself, go in a room, do jumping jacks, do push-ups, do a quick little HIIT workout. It could be a minute long, and that often is enough just to calm us down slightly, and so that we can re-engage more effectively with the world. The last part is obviously just changing our breathing. We know that when we inhale, it tends to speed up our heart, and when we exhale, it slows it down. So when we're stressed out or when we're angry and we're taking these very shallow breaths, well, this just increases our heart rate, which makes everything worse. So paced breathing is really making an effort to exhale longer than you're inhaling. So you would inhale for 4 and exhale for 6. So slowing down the heart rate, changing the body chemistry, bringing those emotions down so that we can come out of this 911 crisis mode. The 2 last skills, so we have the self-soothe and the improve. So self-soothing is really taking care of yourself, and improving is trying to find meaning in the distress. So whether that's using prayer, if you're spiritual, or meditation, just looking for the meaning within the pain can help us to avoid the suffering. Once we learn the distress tolerance skills, we then moved on to the reality acceptance skills. So that of radical acceptance, turning the mind, willingness, as well as mindfulness of current thoughts. All of these skills are based on Buddhist principles that pain is a part of the human condition and it's not something we can escape, but suffering is optional. So when we learn to practice radical acceptance, and radical acceptance is really defined as it is what it is, that's the core mantra of it, we learn that by engaging ourselves or trying to gain control or change things that we can't, we cause suffering for ourselves. Instead of just accepting the situation, it doesn't mean that we need to approve of it. It just means that we need to tolerate it, accept it, and move on. They also taught us how to engage our body in this process of acceptance by teaching us willingness. So willingness is accepting what is, but physically manifesting it. So using willing hands, what they called, for those of you who have done yoga or meditation, sometimes teachers will ask us to lay in Shavasana with our hands open, or meditate with our hands sitting on our lap open. And there's also this concept of a half smile. So smiling just enough so that others can't notice, but it's micro changes to our body that indicate to our brain that we are open to experiences, to acceptance. It helps to calm us down. It's when we're angry, we tend to tense up. Our hands, our whole body, we're closed off. And when we practice willingness, we open ourselves up to the pain. We accept and acknowledge that it's there. And this makes the whole process of it that much easier. That was a very brief overview of the main skills that were taught to us during this module. Now I wanted to dive into what the main takeaways are, what the positive and negative things are from this module. Honestly, this module was extremely useful and at the same time very difficult. It's difficult because when you're in this crisis mode, the last thing you want to do is to be mindful of your thoughts, be mindful of your emotions, be mindful of your environment, to take a step back, to practice skills that may seem silly at first, but are actually very beneficial. So I did have a hard time at first applying the skills and also being open-minded to them. For example, when we learned the willingness and the willing hands, I had asked them a question during the course saying, how effective is this when you're in crisis mode? I was very doubtful that this would help me, even though I do practice willing hands when I'm meditating or when I'm doing yoga. To me, I thought that this skill was great when I'm already relaxed, but I didn't see how it could honestly work when I was super angry. And boy, was I wrong. So I actually forced myself to practice willing hands and have smiling and an open, inviting posture when having difficult conversations. And honestly, for me, I found that the degree of my anger or emotions were not as high as when I'm physically closed off to things. This is not to say that this is a magic thing that will work every single time. It just helps to ground me and for me to remain more neutral than maybe I would if I wasn't using those skills. Another important thing that I learned during this module is that yes, the skills are effective when you're in crisis mode. It's also important to build up the habit when you're not, so that when you do go into 911 mode, you have the tools already built into yourself so that you can pull them out more easily. So what I mean by this is that using intense exercise, it's great in the moment. It's also great if you try to build it into your routine daily. Practicing willingness and radical acceptance. They are great in the moment. They're also wonderful if you can meditate daily and try to be open and think of things that you want to radically accept in your life, whether that's relationships with people, the relationship you have with yourself, things that are out of your control. So you can work on the skills to build up the habit of doing them when you're not in a crisis mode. So when you're in wise mind and calm, to better integrate them into your system. So as I mentioned, when you're going into a situation that's very unpleasant and very distressing, those things don't seem as impossible to pull off. Once again, I want to place the emphasis on being open-minded and accepting that sometimes things will not go as planned when you're closed-minded, and which, looking back in retrospect, I think that I was a lot more closed-minded during the second module than I was during the third one. And the experience for me was so much better when I was open and receptive to things, even though maybe sometimes I was doubtful of how useful that they would be. Just trying them or forcing myself to do them, I realized that, wow, those things actually have a big impact on my mood. They have a big impact on my relationship with myself. And these are tools that I want to carry and continue practicing for the rest of my life. Similarly to the two other modules, another takeaway was this whole aspect of community. Honestly, I have never felt so supported and validated in my life. I looked forward to my group sessions because we were all this little group of people who understood each other, had very similar experiences, and the community aspect of these DBT programs are honestly one of the main key features, and they are so helpful in fighting those feelings of aloneness. When you go into these and you finally find people who relate to you, you feel a sense of belongingness, you feel at home. This makes the process of change that much easier. Honestly, this program was one of the most difficult things I have ever done in my life, and at the same time, it was one of the most meaningful and rewarding things that I could have ever done for myself. I have changed and grown so much in 6 months, and I didn't think that this level or speed of change would be possible given the extensive time that I had been experiencing these behaviors for prior to the course. This is not to say that there's not any work left to be done. There's always going to be work for everyone for the rest of our lives, and if we're not changing and growing, then what's the point? The last session was definitely very emotional. I did not realize the extent that I had attached myself to these individuals and to the whole learning process. I was really sad. It was bittersweet. I was very proud of myself and sad for finishing at the same time. But what makes this all worth it is that now I have this community of people that I can fall back on whenever things don't go as well. And I have all these wonderful tools that I picked up along the way that I can carry over into my life. Overall, that is the big overview of the program, of the skills I learned, the takeaways from it. And you might be wondering, is it worth it? Should I really invest all this time and money into doing a program like this? The answer for me is yes, 100%. I would recommend this to not everyone. You need to be willing and ready to change, but when you are, I really do think that DBT programs for those who have BPD can be really life-changing. I hope that this video gave you hope and inspired you to start your own healing journey, whatever that looks like. If that's a DBT program, if that's individual therapy, if that's meeting with a coach, do something or find something that works for you, and when you do, stick with it. If you want to see more videos about all things BPD, including my life, I encourage you to hit the subscribe button down below, as well as the bell notification up top to get notified when I do post new videos every Monday. On that note, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you back here next time for another episode of On the Line.